Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for taking the time to talk about Google Analytics with me today. Today we'll be covering an introduction to Google Analytics, so essentially a cursory overview of the types of things that are available and the types of business decisions that we can answer using this tool. So let's start off with introductions. My name is Leslie Strickland. I'm the Manager of Business Intelligence at accesso, based out of our Lake Mary office. My team is responsible for a couple of different functions. The first is client-facing reporting, and then the second is analytics, which is the topic of our discussion today. First off, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you know what to expect and how to participate in today's session. You may have already noticed that your voices have been muted. They will remain muted throughout the session. However, you will be able to type questions to our moderator, Katie, throughout the webinar. Then at the end of the session, there will be a Q&A taken from your typed questions. So let's start off talking a little bit about accesso. At accesso, we believe that technology has the power to redefine the guest experience. Everything we do starts with thinking about the guest experience first, which allows us to help simplify operations, improve guest satisfaction, and drive growth for our clients. Our product suite has grown a lot over the years, but we see our solution as falling into 4 categories. We have queuing products, ticketing and POS, point of sale products, distribution products, and guest experience products. Together, our solutions help us connect visitors and venues using innovative technologies to improve guest experiences and drive revenue for our partners. From theme parks to performing arts centers, zoos, and festivals, our products and services support some of the top attractions in the world in at least 9 different markets. All of these markets have unique needs, but there is one thing that they all have in common: a demand for innovative solutions in an ever-changing digital marketplace. Our focus on research and development is a major point of differentiation for all of our products. We invest heavily in this area because our industry demands it, because our clients benefit from it, and because it makes a positive difference in the guest experience. And guest experience ties really well into what we're going to talk about today, web analytics. Web analytics is the collection, reporting, and analysis of web data for the purpose of improving the performance of a website. And when we say improving the performance of a website, what we really mean is improving the experience for the guest using that website. And ultimately, what is the goal? The goal is to increase conversions. Now, a conversion can be any type of conversion. So it can be a phone call to your group sales associates, it could be form fills for more information, or it can ultimately be, like it is for most of our clients, a sale of an online ticket. In the digital era we live in today, it's very important to care about how people engage with your site. Is that site easy? Are they getting what they need? Are there any barriers to purchase? Ultimately, it's our responsibility to deliver an experience that makes the purchase easy. Now, I think we're all pretty clear that our customers are online. We're all online, we're all on our phones. TechCrunch put out a study recently that said the average US consumer spends 5 hours a day on their mobile device. Pew Research Center put out a study that said 79% of Americans say they make purchases online. So both of these support our assumption that our guests are online. But we can't be too hasty. Our online guests are picky. Adobe recently did a study about content engagement, and I pulled out 2 really important metrics from that study. The first is that 39% of people said they would stop engaging with a website if it took too long to load. 38% of people said they would stop engaging with a website if the content was unattractive in color or function. So that's 40% of people in 2 different categories that might leave our site because it takes too long to load or because it isn't pretty. That means we are responsible for trying to make that experience better. So what we lean on to improve those things is the conversion optimization lifecycle. And really, it's exactly what it sounds like. It is a circle of actions that help us overall improve what the experience is. So that goes from design and implementation, defining success, measuring that success, and then using that information to take action. So let's look at those steps a little bit deeper. Design and implementation. Now, when you think of design, you probably think of changing the colors or the fonts or something within your website. But design can be anything that changes the experience. That can be your product set, it can be your promotions, it can be your product price. Defining success. So when you know you're going to change something, you're changing the flow of your website, or you're going to change those colors, or you're changing your product set, you need to have some context as to what your success is. So my suggestion to you and what we do here at accesso is we generally look at year over year, especially because many of our clients have seasonal business. So you look at your performance year over year, and that way you're able to set a benchmark as to what your goal ought to be. The next step is to measure. You need to be able to quantify that information and compare it to your benchmark. And then finally, and most importantly, you need to be able to take that information and feed it back into the beginning of the cycle. So what information did you get that's going to change your next design or implementation? So I want to take a moment to talk about the difference between web tracking and media tracking. Web tracking is what we're going to talk about today. It's tools like Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics, Web Trends, and Clicky. These tools are tools that are measuring actions and behavior on your site. So things like sessions, the sources of those sessions, actions taken during those sessions, and ultimately conversions. Media tracking also looks at performance, but it looks at performance specifically of the media that's driving traffic to your site. So most of you may have marketing departments that have digital ad campaigns or digital marketing campaigns. They may be employing services like DoubleClick or AdRoll to serve ads online. And those tools have an ability to track the conversion that comes from those pieces of media. So essentially, you can see whether or not your media is returning value. However, these tools do not give you the context about performance within the website. So we will spend some time looking at Google Analytics, looking at the different kinds of reports there are in that, but I wanted to spend some time talking about the business questions that we can answer with Google Analytics. There are so many different business questions that you can answer, and I wanted to take some time to talk about different kinds of questions. So the first is overall performance. So how effective is our site compared to last year? What devices are our consumers using? And how do those things impact what we're doing? There's looking at pricing. So did changes in pricing year over year impact our conversion rate? Is the promotion that we're doing driving sales of more than just promotional products? There's media. Is our digital media driving sales? Which part of our digital media buy is most effective? There's also design, and this is probably what most people think about when they think about web optimization. Did the new checkout step we added convert better or worse? Are the upsells effective? That kind of thing. So I don't want you to pinhole yourself into web analytics is only for design. It's for all kinds of things within your entire platform, essentially every piece of the platform that the guest interacts with online. So now let's go ahead and transition into Google Analytics itself. I want to start with some basics on Google Analytics to get everybody on the same playing field in terms of what it is and how it works. And then we will transition into a demo / training on the platform. So what is Google Analytics? Google Analytics tracks and reports website traffic on different types of information, including your customer profile. These are things like the location your customer is from, the browser language, the browser type, the device that they're using. We have traffic sources. So where are guests coming from? Are they coming from Google Organic? Are they coming from your paid email campaigns? We have content engagement. So this is what pages they're interacting with, what pages they're landing on, what pages they're exiting on. And then we also have e-commerce actions. So are people engaging with your products, viewing them, adding them to the carts, and ultimately purchasing them? How is Google Analytics implemented? I don't want to get too technical here, but I do want to take a moment to talk about how it's implemented. Google Analytics is essentially a piece of JavaScript that is placed on every page of your site. This JavaScript then sends information back to your account, and that is based on user cookies. All right, now that we've talked about that, we can go into our demo here. So our demo is going to cover a few different topics. The first is a brief introduction on account management. So essentially some of the highlights there. We will talk a little bit about navigating the different report categories, as there is a ton of different information you can get from Google Analytics. Within each individual report, there are many different options in terms of manipulating that information. So we are going to spend some time on one report understanding the different options for filtering and managing that report. The next piece is segmentation. Essentially, this is how do you filter the different reports you're looking at. And segmentation is really key to understanding your traffic. And then finally, we'll spend some time looking at some of the top used reports and their uses. All right. Google Analytics has a really great demo account that you can get access to, and the account that we're using today is Google Merchandise Store. What we have here is essentially a demo account that has all of the information that you would have in a standard Google Analytics account, so we can do some training against something with real data. Now there's many different pieces and parts of Google Analytics, so we are going to skip over some of those to talk about what I think are the most important. So the first thing you will see when you log in is you will come to this home page, and it has a nice little dashboard of some high-level information. You have your users, revenue, conversion rate. Over here, you'll see this number moving. This is real-time data, so essentially how many guests are on the site right now. And then you have some other information in this dashboard as well. But the first place we're going to start is your administration. So when you click on the top left here, you'll see your list of analytics accounts if you have more than one. For that account, how many properties are you tracking? A property is tracked by a unique ID, so you can see here there's UA dash and then some numbers. That's the unique ID associated with your Google Analytics account. So if you have multiple sites that you're tracking, you may have multiple properties. And then finally, you have a view. So a view is essentially a filter of data. So this ID is tracked on Google Merchandise Store. And my master view is my view of data that may have a couple of IP addresses excluded or something like that, but that's my main account. You can also access your administration through this little gear down at the bottom left. So if we were to navigate to that, you'll have the same information here. You'll have the accounts, and you'll see that drop down there. You'll have your properties and your drop down here if you have more than one properties, and then your view. Within each, you can do a few different things. You can do some user management. You can get information about your property. And then under view settings is the most important. So this is essentially the actual grouping of the data. What you can do here is you can set your view settings. You can set filters on this view. So like I said, if you have internal traffic that you don't want to be included in your data, you can set those filters here. And then also you have e-commerce settings here. This tab is going to be very important for every new account that you set up. If you're trying to track anything with e-commerce data, you have to come to your e-commerce settings and actually enable that information. Otherwise, it will not show in your Google Analytics account. Next on the list. So now let's talk about report navigation. So on the left-hand side here, as you know, we're on our home page. We have a little dashboard here. Below that, we have customization. So these are things like dashboards and custom reports. When you get a little bit more familiar with this tool, you'll want to create some custom reports with information that's specific to your needs, or you may want to create a dashboard sort of like this one, but more specific to what you need. The next is real time. So just like we have this small widget right here with some real-time data, there are a few different real-time reports so that you can see live action information happening. I don't use real-time reporting very often unless I'm tracking a new ID and want to see that it's tracking immediately. The next section of data you have here is your audience data. So within my audience data, this is information about the profile of my customer. So under geo, you would see browser language or location. So this is Google Analytics trying to pinpoint where your guests are coming from. You may have things like browser and OS or mobile devices. So essentially everything that can profile your guest as much as possible. Now, Google Analytics does not allow PII, personally identifiable information. So that's something to be careful of when you're setting up analytics. You do not want to pass names or email addresses or phone numbers or something like that. The next is acquisition. So while on the accesso side, we're not as concerned about where the traffic is coming from, we're very aware that the client side is. So you want to know what kinds of sources are driving traffic to your site. Are they quality pieces of traffic? Are those guests actually interested in what you're selling? So you'll see here there are different reports that can tell you about that traffic and then the performance of that traffic. The next is behavior. These reports are looking at things like site pages, the pages that are viewed, landing pages, exit pages. And then finally, conversions. So this is going to be your e-commerce data. This is total transactions, conversions, information about the different orders that have been made. All right, so let's take a sample report and spend some time looking at the options within a report. One of the reports that I like to use the most is under audience, mobile, and then overview. So once this report loads, there's a lot of information here. We'll make sure we get to most of it. The first thing I want to note here is that we're looking at device category for this report. This is giving me desktop, mobile, and tablet traffic separated out. So I can see how many guests have visited from these devices. And then if I go all the way to the right, I can see what my conversion rate is for those different devices. Now, a quick side note here. In terms of conversion optimization, in terms of analysis of web performance, on the accesso side, we almost always separate out desktop and mobile when we're doing analysis. And that's because they perform very differently. So essentially, the things that you learn about desktop may or may not apply to mobile. And you can see that here in the sample data that we have. Desktop is showing a 3.37 conversion rate, and mobile is less than 1%. Now, these may not be actual conversion rates that we see at accesso, but there is a very big difference between mobile and desktop in most cases. So that's something to keep in mind. So at the bottom here, you have your table of data, and you can see what those pieces of information are. Google Analytics has some really great tool tips, so you can hover over those and see detail about what that piece of information is if you're not sure. The first thing to think about is your date. So up here in the top right, you have your date selection. It defaults to the last 7 days. You can select some predefined dates if you'd like. So if I want to select last month, I can do that and click apply. And now my report is showing my last month's data. I can also select the actual date if I'd like, which is really nice. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Another thing that I'm able to do is actually compare. So like we were talking about earlier on in the presentation, context is really important. So I may want to compare to my previous month, or I may want to compare to my previous year. So I'm going to select previous year and hit apply. Now you can see I have 2 lines on my graph here. And if I scroll down to my table, I have some metrics about the difference between those two. So year over year, I'm down 1%, almost 2% in terms of total users. And if I go all the way to the right, I'm actually up 81% in conversion rate year over year. So that's a good thing. It's great that Google Analytics does these calculations on the fly. So even at the granular level of desktop, mobile, and tablet, I can see what my differences are year over year for this month that I've selected. Now, I don't want to see that comparison anymore, so I'll just click that off. What you also have is a nice graph here. So what this graph is defaulting is to users. And in this case, I actually have the option to select that graph and change it. So I don't care so much about my total users, but I do want to see my e-commerce conversion rate trending for that month. And I can see I have a lot of variance in my days in terms of conversion rate. And if you hover over, you can actually see what that rate is. So maybe day is too granular for me, and in that case, I can actually change my granularity of this graph to week. And now I can see that week over week, maybe I actually don't have that much of a difference. All right. So another ability that you have is to add additional information to a report. So this report has my device categories, and I care about my device categories, but I also care about maybe the traffic sources in each of these categories. So if you see here, I have the option to add a secondary dimension. Essentially, this is my primary dimension, and a dimension is a means of segmenting or grouping the data. Right now, I'm grouped at the device level. So if I click my secondary dimension, I now have options for things that I want to select. In this case, what I care about is actually going to be under acquisition, and I care about my medium. And my medium is essentially a category of traffic. So I'm going to click on that, and that has actually added to my report. And now my list in the report has gotten much longer. So if I need to see more information, I can always click here and say, show me more rows of that data. And now I have all of my data here. And maybe I've decided I don't actually need to see that many rows of data. That's not helpful. I can easily remove that dimension. And the last option I want to show you is the ability to search. So say you do have a very long list of groupings here, and you want to filter out. I can just search and click enter. And now I've filtered this bottom report here just to my tablet information. And then I can click that off, and I'm back to normal. All right. So now we've looked at mobile overview, which is one of the most used reports on the accesso side, to get a high-level understanding of how my different devices are performing. So now let's talk about the second report that I find the most important. So it's also going to be under audience, and now this one's going to be under technology and then network. So if you scroll down and look at this report, I can see that it's telling me what cable companies are actually driving traffic. That's not particularly important to me. But if you look at my primary dimension option here, I actually have two options, service provider and host name. Host name is what I'm really after. Host name is going to give you the information about what site URLs are being tracked with your account. So if we go here, this is the host name that visitors use to reach your site, typically your site's URL. So in Google's case, this demo account is tracking shop.googlemerchandise.com, and it's tracking googlemerchandisestore.com. So if I'm able to look here, I can actually see these two different things are being tracked. So this is important for a few reasons. If you see that you have any bogus data or seemingly bogus data in your account, you'll want to come and just make sure that you're tracking the URLs you expect to track. You can also use this report if you have a new property that you're tracking with the same account, and you want to be sure that it's starting to calculate data as well. You have all of the same options that you want here in terms of date, being able to search, adding secondary dimensions, etc. All right, let's move on to the next report here. So the next report that I think is most valuable is under acquisition. So I made a little mention of it before. In terms of acquisition or understanding where your traffic is coming from, that on the accesso side is not necessarily our primary focus, but it is a primary focus for clients. So we're going to go to acquisition, all traffic, and then source and medium. And this report here is giving me an idea of where my traffic is coming from. Is it Google Organic? Is it Google Paid? Let's see, what else do we have here? We have a YouTube referral. We have some affiliate partners. So what's really great about this is I can have all of these sources together, and then if I scroll over to the right here, I can see my performance. So while Google Organic isn't costing me anything, my conversion rate's pretty low on that front. but I can see that if I scroll down, that my gdeals.googleplex is driving a pretty high conversion rate. So if there was any way that I could work with my partner to increase the total number of guests coming from that site, I may be able to get some really great benefit out of it. Now, the one thing that we haven't talked about in terms of reporting options is being able to segment. So I can see my overall performance by my different traffic types, but in this case, I specifically want to look at mobile. Say we're doing some mobile marketing campaign specifically. So if I scroll up to the top, you may have noticed that there's a box here that says all users. All users is the segment or the filter that's being applied to this report. All of your reports will default to all users. However, when you click on this segment, you have the option to actually change what the overall report filter is. So I don't necessarily want to look at all users anymore. If I select system, I'll be able to see and essentially default segments that Google has created. And if I hover over these, I'll actually get the detail about what they are. So in this case, I want to look at my mobile traffic. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. I can see it's populated here, and I can apply. And now I'm looking at my conversion rates from my different sources on the mobile level. So I can see my Google Organic, for example, dropped significantly in terms of performance, 0.17. And then I can see that my partner that was performing really well, GDeals, has dropped off altogether. They're not driving traffic, or at least not a significant amount of traffic at all. So your segmenting is going to be really important to understand the different types of traffic and how they're performing. So being able to segment to your mobile and desktop is going to be really important. You may also need to focus down yourself if you want to take a look at your paid campaigns. You could create a segment for Google CPC and actually look at all of your different reports with that segment on. So if you want to get rid of your segment, you just drag and drop off and hit apply. And now we're back to our all users. So like I said before, under source and medium, there are a few other reports in here that are very similar. This is kind of your aggregate. It's going to get you everything in terms of sources of traffic. This is going to be really great for your context in terms of performance. So essentially, how is your different media, paid and unpaid, performing next to each other? We're going to skip over behavior and move to my favorite part of Google, which is the enhanced eCommerce report. So if you have enhanced eCommerce enabled on your Google Analytics account, there are two really awesome reports that you'll have access to. The first is shopping behavior, and the second is checkout behavior. So let's go ahead and check that shopping behavior report. And as you can see here, what you have is a really simple and clean sales funnel from all sessions all the way through to transaction. And these steps are standard to Google. So you can see sessions with product views, sessions with cart ads, sessions with initiating a checkout, and then ultimately the transaction. So this gives you an idea of how all of your guests are funneling through. So there's a few things to look at on this report. The first is these gray boxes are providing you that conversion rate between the steps. So about 17% of my guests are going from all sessions to product views. This is an immediate thing for me to think about. How do I get more of my guests coming to my site, taking a look at my products? You also have overall conversion rate. So from the initial step to whichever step you select, the small gray conversion rate is going to be the conversion rate from the beginning of the funnel to this point. So ultimately, our overall conversion rate is 2%. Now, you may have heard about abandonment rates. You also have those. So instead of looking at the conversion rate between steps, you may want to look at your abandonment rate between steps. And that's what this red dot number is here. So if you think about all sessions, 81% of people are abandoning from your initial site load, then that may be something that I seriously consider working on in terms of either providing more information about your products, making your product buttons more clear, making your call to action more clear, pulling things above the fold, that kind of thing. So like I said before, you really want to look at segments. So in this case, this aggregate information gives me some context of how my site is performing. But if my mobile and my desktop perform very differently, I may want to look at that segment separately. So I'm going to go ahead and click on here again, and I'm going to go to my system segments, and again, I want to look at my mobile traffic. So if you remember that at first conversion rate was 17%, and now I can see my mobile conversion rate from sessions to sessions with product reviews is 9%. So I know with 40,000 sessions coming from mobile, I have a lot of upside if I can increase this conversion rate just a little bit. You may also want to look at your source traffic in here. So if you are paying for media, either email campaigns or digital marketing of some kind, you want to understand how those guests are also funneling through. So we can go ahead and actually create that segment if it doesn't already exist. So you would go new segment here. And in this case, I can scroll down through my options and see that I want to do traffic source. And I want to do my medium. That is going to be, you can see actually when you click in here, that'll actually provide you some options. In this case, I want to see what my affiliate traffic looks like. So we're going to name it affiliate. And you can see it's estimated what this traffic looks like. So it's actually only 1.8% of my users. So actually I've changed my mind. I don't want to look at affiliate. It's a really small amount of my traffic. I want to look at my CPC, my paid search. That's 15% of my users. That's a much bigger chunk of users that will be beneficial for me to take a look at. So I can save that segment. And I can actually remove this mobile segment because I don't want that. And now I can see for my paid search, only 5% of people are transitioning from the initial view of my site to a product view. So again, in terms of understanding the quality of that marketing campaign and understanding how those guests are moving through my store, I can actually see I have some work to do on my ads being more clear. Maybe my ads need to be more direct and specific to products, and I need to drive guests more directly to my actual product view instead of to my main site. There are a lot of different things that will lead to questions that you may be able to test and or answer by segmenting down. So we'll go ahead and get rid of CPC and go back to all users. And then we're going to switch to our checkout behavior. So checkout behavior is basically taking, after somebody initiates a checkout, it's giving you the detail on those checkout steps. Now the checkout steps might be different for every store, and that's why Google has put them in a separate account or a separate report here. So in this case, in Google Demo account, they have billing and shipping information, payment information, review, and then sessions with transactions. So again, once a guest has started a checkout, you really want to see that they're committed. If you're having trouble with getting people moving through your checkout steps, that is a huge area where you can make some performance improvements. So you want to see things like 70, 80, and even 90% conversion once a guest has already initiated a checkout. And again, you can take a look at those different traffic sources, you can look at your mobile devices, you can look at all different kinds of segments to see how they're moving through these steps and determine if maybe it's not the overall funnel that has a problem, it may be a large source of traffic that you have that has a problem. So that's the main overview on the Google Analytics front in terms of navigating your administration area, navigating the report types, being able to make your way around an individual report and select those different options, adding segments, and then also looking at some of these very highly used reports with Google Analytics. We did want to take some time to talk about Google Tag Manager as well. And Google Tag Manager is essentially a way to better track your site. And that's in terms of actually implementing those tracking pieces. So let's start with, from the beginning, what is Google Tag Manager? Tag Manager is a container that allows tracking tags to be fired on a web page. So think about, like we were talking about with Google Analytics earlier in the session, Google Analytics is JavaScript that's implemented into your site, and that code sends information back to this account that we were just looking at. Google Tag Manager is a container where you can place all of that information, and then you can dynamically fire that information instead of having to code it into your website. So let's look at the concepts of Tag Manager, and that may help give some context. So the first is we have tags. And these are code snippets that fire information back to your analytics tool. So just like your Google Analytics JavaScript, if you're working with any media partners to implement Facebook campaigns or something like that, they will provide you a conversion tag. So it's a little bit of script that ends up firing somewhere. Then we have triggers. So triggers are a way to determine when to fire a tag. So instead of hard coding these tags into our store to fire at certain times, we can say, don't send this tag until this page occurs. And then that tag will fire at that point. And then finally, we have variables. And variables are snippets and pieces of information, whether dynamic or constant, that can be used in tags. So back to our Facebook conversion tag example, we have a Facebook conversion tag. It's a little piece of snippet, a snippet of code that's going to send information back to Facebook to say, hey, you had a conversion on this website. So our trigger says when that Facebook conversion tag occurs, it happens on our confirmation page. And our variable may be that we're sending back the order.id and we're sending back the total revenue associated with that purchase. So let's take a quick look at what Tag Manager looks like. This may also give you some context. So each container, you can see I have a couple of different containers here. They also have a unique ID, just like Google Analytics. And this helps me know which container I'm getting information from on my site. So we'll go into this demo container here. And you can see it's not the most beautiful interface, not as nice as Google Analytics. Let's go ahead and click on our tags. And now I can see the list of tags that I have implemented. What's really great about Tag Manager is it has a lot of tracking in terms of what's been updated, when it was updated, and who updated it. So it's a really good function for managing change control as well. So in this case, I have my tag name, my tag type. In this case, it's an analytics tag, a trigger for when this tag needs to fire. And that's how Google Analytics or Google Tag Manager knows that this information needs to occur. So you can see we have a tag type here. Google Tag Manager is integrated with multiple different partners to have templates. So essentially you don't have to insert a bunch of code or JavaScript or HTML. You just fill in the information you need. So you would select a universal analytics page view tag and you would just insert your ID instead of having to take that snippet of code and actually implement it. And then finally, we'll take a look at our variables here. And you can see there's lots of different things that can be a variable. In this case, we made our tracking ID a variable, so we can use that instead of hand typing it in every time. But this is also where we would pull in that information from the store, like your order ID. All right. So before we move on to QA, I want to talk about a couple of additional resources. If you have had your interest piqued by this webinar today, Google Analytics has Google Analytics Academy, and Google Analytics Academy is a training resource provided by Google. They provide videos and information on all different aspects from beginner to more advanced concepts, both on the Google Analytics and Google Tag Manager front. So all you have to do is search for Google Analytics Academy and you'll be able to easily find that. The next is Loves Data has put together a really great glossary for information related to Google Analytics. So as you saw in the platform, there's a lot of different dimensions, a lot of different metrics, a lot of information that you can get to, and it can be overwhelming if you're not familiar with all of it, or if you're trying to find a specific piece of information and you don't know where to find it. So if you look for the ultimate Google Analytics glossary from Loves Data, they have a really great consolidated glossary that you can use to help you navigate. And that's all we have for today. So at this time, I would love to open the floor for questions. So I'm going to hand it back over to Katie. Katie, do we have any questions that have been submitted?
Thanks, Leslie. We do have a couple here. So let's start with this one. What kind of information can I pass back through a tag in Tag Manager?
Really, this is just about development implementation and what's needed. So the most commonly used pieces of information are order ID, the value of an order, maybe the count of tickets. Some tags use an array or a detail of the products that were actually purchased in a purchase. In some cases, there's other information like a zip code or something that may be passed back through a tag. It may not be sent to Google Analytics, but some of these third-party tags can take that information. So like I said, it's really just about what do you need, and then and working with development to get that information available.
Great. And I think we have time for one last question. So if we don't address your question now, we will be sure to follow up with you individually. And with that, our last question, let's do this one here. How would I segment people who have visited a particular page, such as a promotional page set up for a specific promotion?
All right, let's go ahead and take a look at that. I actually still have Google Analytics pulled up here. I think it'll be best to take a look at an actual demo of that. So we'll go ahead and go back into our segment here and say new segment. Obviously, you have a lot of different options here. In this case, you're going to want to select condition. And now you can see I'm going to include sessions, and then I have some information here I can filter by. So if I click on this, I'm actually just going to search for my page. I care about a specific promotional page, so I can see page here. I can hover over it if I need a little bit of information about that page. And I'm looking for pages that contain, in this case, it may be /promo1 or something like that. Google here is providing me the ones that they know of. So we'll go ahead and select basket. We'll pretend that this is our basket promo. We'll name it. And so I can see 8% of my guests have visited this particular page. And if I go ahead and segment, save my segment, now I have my guests who have visited my basket promo page.
Great. Thank you so much, Leslie. And thank you to everyone for attending today's webinar, Introduction to Google Analytics. As I mentioned before, if we didn't get to address your question right now, we will follow up with you individually. If you would like to learn more about our accesso solutions, or if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at sales@accesso.com. You will also receive a follow-up email within 24 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar for your reference. On behalf of Accesso and Leslie, thank you so much for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.